Isn't this the most beautiful thing you've ever seen?
And I saw Corvette, and now I understand why the Corvette is beloved by man.
This is the 87th Corvette made. It has under 6,000 original miles, and I'm going to drive it. Don't think of this as transportation from a 2020 perspective. This is a rolling tribute to pure artistic expression. This is the first album from a band made in someone's basement by a group of eccentrics who didn't think they were going to be famous. Like Peel Slowly and See by the Velvet Underground and Nico, Gordon by Bare Naked Ladies, Bat Outta Hell by Meat. That's what I'm talking about. And thank you to Harry from Classic Promenade in Phoenix, Arizona. Link in the description. Go check out their inventory. Here's what it's like to drive a Year One C1. It's very tiny on the inside. In the 1950s, and leading up to that, the 1940s, there were no multivitamins, protein powder, or nutrition science. You see people in newsreels, and the average size is like 5'5", 130 pounds. Go look at Humphrey Bogart in the Maltese Falcon. The dude is 5'8", and yeah, he looks big because he's got those coats on. Look at him when he takes his coat off. He has like child shoulders. My point is, a C1 was made for people who were born malnourished. The massive steering wheel is close to the narrow seat and the low windshield, which doesn't shield us today. You know, we're too tall. As we'll discuss later, General Motors was just learning how to build fiberglass cars. So, as you drive along, the hood moves, the doors move, the trunk rattles. What's a sports car? And so GM is like, well, it has an inline 6-cylinder engine. Oh, that's good. Yeah, it revs to negative RPM. Oh, that's bad. It has a 2-speed automatic transmission. 2-speed in a sports car. All it does is rob the engine of whatever power it does have. It has mechanical drum brakes. So with mechanical drum brakes with no booster on them, you push your foot down on the brake pedal and nothing happens, so you push harder and nothing happens, and then you push harder and then they all lock up. You were right. It has a steering box that's sloppier than a bus full of moms on a Napa Valley wine tour, and there are no seat belts, head restraints, and the door sills come up to your oblique muscles. It can't go, it can't brake, it can't steer, and it can't keep its passengers inside. But just look at it. Look at a C1. Come on. I am everlasting cool in this. This isn't Wingadinga. It's too early for Wingadinga. Wingadinga hasn't been invented yet. If you pull this car up to a bunch of big kahuna C5 owners who are all, my Corvette is weird because my Corvette was only one of 500 made with the red color on the Tuesday of the rarest September by Cheeseburger Johnny. It was one of 1,000 made with the Ann Arbor stitching on the Corvetteous year 2003. And watch them shut up when you arrive, because this is rare, and theirs aren't. And you exit the C1 with the confident indifference of an electric longboarder riding in traffic. Of course, this story only works if this C1 is driven at all. At the time of driving, before we even took it out, and thank you again for letting us drive this, it had 5,819 and 1/10 original miles. Most likely this C1 will be bought and then displayed. And in cases like this, I'm fine with that. Corvettes have this weird reputation, mostly due to the style of jorts and New Balance sneakers which buy these things. But it's the idea that something must be eating away at you if you have your sights set on owning one, especially a classic Corvette. 1953 Corvette, the official car of the midlife crisis and aggressive self-help books.
Reset your life before you regret your life.
And yet, for all the talk of a Corvette signifying a man who sets aside a stack each month just for tipping cam girls, there's something more elegant here, even if the first model, like this, lacks the refinement of later models. Because make no mistake, the Corvette is an American icon. We own this. A vehicle that Chevy wanted sports car enthusiasts to take seriously, and it's something they're still trying to do today. Well, you're just as likely to see younger people driving Corvettes these days as their fathers. But it all had to start somewhere, right? So let's talk about this red velvet cake on four wheels by diving into homeschooled history. It was 1953. And General Motors didn't know if this new car would succeed. They made a prototype for Motorama, and the crowd went American values nuts for it. And by that I mean men whistled, and boys said things like, "Neato," and old people had polio. You see, it was designed by a team led by automotive design legend Harley Earl, who wanted to make the kind of custom car he made for celebrities in his young adulthood, with all the style and performance, right, he could cram into the project, but with the affordability of something far less gaudy. And considering we're in the immediate post-war years, it made all the sense in the world. It was the right styling at the right time, as European sports cars were becoming more widely respected and desired. Stuff like Jaguars, MGs, and Nash Healey. And you can see all of those influences in this first generation Corvette. I mean, look, they put rally cages on the headlights, and you think you're so original in your Saab, putting electrical tape on your headlights like you race this thing every weekend. They've been doing this stuff a half century ago. So Harley Earl managed to get the president of General Motors and the head of Chevy division to go along with his plan to craft an American sports car using mostly stock Chevy parts, because there was a hole in the market for an affordable roadster. Harley Earl wanted it to be about $2,000, which is the equivalent to roughly $21,467 in 2020. But when the car went into production a year later in 1953, it ended up being way more expensive, with an MSRP of roughly $3,500, to the modern 2020 equivalent of $33,685. So General Motors cobbled together 300 examples in 1953, but they weren't used to working with fiberglass, so they were just learning on the job. By 1954, production had been ramped up considerably, and yet sales were slow that year, perhaps due to 1953 and 1954 being the only two model years sold without a V8 engine, from what we could find anyway. For critics and consumers, the Corvette was mostly just fine. Nothing to dismiss, but nothing to get excited over either. And it definitely wasn't comparable to European sports cars. The October 1954 issue of Popular Mechanics did a survey of Corvette owners, zeroing in on those who previously owned foreign sports cars. Out of this segment, 22% rated their Corvette unfavorably in comparison, with the main issues being body leaks during rainy weather, and the much more serious problem that it just wasn't taken seriously as a true sports car. Perhaps due to its unimpressive performance, relative to the expectation. Yet, those 1953 Corvettes became treasured in the years to come, owing to their rarity. So how did this number 87 out of 300 survive? Well, in 1962, a 20-year-old kid pestered the owner of one of these original models into selling it to him. The kid paid in installments, and eventually the car was his. The kid's name was Lyle Hill, and he would own this car for 50 years. However, because he was a serviceman stationed in Germany, he had to put it up on blocks and place it in storage. And that's where this car remained, from 1965 until 2003. Lyle got it running again for the Corvette's 50th anniversary, and because it was in storage for damn near 40 years, it was the lowest mileage example of one of these first-run Corvettes in existence, clocking in at just 5,800 miles at the time of certification. Wait, I have to go double check on Google to make sure this is the lowest mile one.
Some snow is possible over northern Pennsylvania Sunday night and Monday as colder air wraps around a developing coastal low near New England. Here is the latest National Weather Service forecast for Perry, Cumberland, Dauphin, and Lebanon counties, including the city of Harrisburg. Tonight, mostly cloudy, patchy fog after midnight, lows in the lower 40s, north winds around 5 miles an hour. Saturday, mostly Saturday.
No, I just checked. This isn't the lowest mile Corvette. There's an Ed Floss Corvette that's also a 1953 with 4,000 miles. But that was in 2015. Has someone been driving that since? I don't know. Engine time. This sports a 235 cubic inch Blue Flame engine. It's an inline 6-cylinder engine with triple Carter carburetors. Triple carb setups tend to be very grumpy, but I guess it's just part of the car's character, sort of like the 2-speed Powerglide automatic transmission, that this car has. But back to the engine. The 235 became standard on all Chevy passenger cars by 1953, in 2 versions. A solid lifter variant known as the Thrift King, and this, the hydraulic lifter Blue Flame. Now, the Blue Flame nickname has been around since 1934, sort of like Willard Scott. And General Motors' advertising team had this interesting styling twist to make it more appealing to consumers. They promised that a blue flame on the cylinder, as opposed to a yellow flame, meant that perfect combustion had been achieved. What does that mean? By what standard? What is this, a high so like the Blue Mountains on a Coors Light bottle? Whatever. Now this 235 is a high pressure 235 making 150 horsepower. So I guess it's high, it's like for whatever its day, it's high compression and we don't have compression numbers. In addition to the mechanical lifters, it also utilized a higher lift camshaft from the 261 cubic inch truck engine. It also has a radio overflow tank, pressurized one at that, which is pretty damn advanced for 1953. I mean, stuff in the 60s didn't have that. It was just the spill on the ground overflow method. There are fabric straps around the bottom of the rear axle, presumably because the drive shaft is at such an angle, I'm just guessing here, that if it sagged any lower, like it could strain the U-joints, like on a lift. I don't know. Tie rods are about as long as a lightsaber's blade, and the steering box is about as hard to find as an unaltered copy of the original trilogy. It's like a child started making a car but ran out of the right kind of Lego blocks, so he just started using connects. All 300 of the first run models were white and red, no options, they all looked identical. A C1 is the living room no one lives in. It's the good kitchen knife that never leaves the drawer. A Corvette C1 is the one good pen you never use. It just sits in your desk. The whiskey sipped only once a year. The way to enjoy a C1 of this heritage is to also own a Corvette C3 with no heritage. The C1 will come out on the perfect day, and you'll feel like Alexander the Great for a few hours and then go home. And then you get back into your nothing special C3, and your beater then feels like it too is worth something. It isn't, but a rising tide lifts all boogie boards, which goes back to the bad rap that Corvettes tend to get. It feels like a car for the man who misses Los Angeles constantly, even when you are in Los Angeles. You miss the idea of what you thought it was, but you love it anyway. A Corvette is LA. Even though we filmed this in Phoenix. You subject yourself to the stereotyping when you admit to liking it, because in certain circles you're not supposed to. You're supposed to strive for more by aiming at something modest, something less commercial, less superficial. But Corvettes are a crock pot. You settle yourself inside, and over a long, slow preparation, less expensive ingredients can be shaped into a dense variety of flavors. Because you don't need a complex automotive palate to enjoy the pure experience a Corvette offers. Just look at it. Just drink it in. Cars can never look like this again. And I think that's beautiful.
White and red with a blue flame, and I feel the heat, like the ghost of Harley Earl is riding shotgun with me. I saw Corvette, now I understand why the Corvette is beloved by me.